My name is Diane. I'm 67 years old, and I live in an old townhouse in the Belmont-Cragen neighborhood here in Chicago. I've been a wife, mother, grandmother, caregiver, seamstress, pie seller at the neighborhood market. But what no one ever taught me was how to be strong when the one you love the most becomes part of a plan that can kill you. Have you ever wondered how far a mother is able to go for a child? Have you ever felt that your kindness has been used against you, as if your love is an obligation and not a choice? Well, that's what happened to me. If you are here, perhaps you carry in your chest the same doubt that once consumed me. Why, after giving everything, are we still tested, as if we were worth nothing anymore? Today I'm going to tell you how. Seconds before donating my kidney to save my son, I was interrupted by a 9-year-old child, my grandson, with a secret in her hands that no one expected. You will understand what it is like to see love itself being turned into a trap. Because when all seemed lost, it was the silence that saved me. But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know one thing. There are moments that stop time. And I lived one of them there, lying on that cold stretcher, with his face covered by the white light of the operating room, and the sound of the heart monitor filling the silence. When I saw my 9-year-old grandson run in, with his dirt-stained shoes and a cell phone in his small hands, something in me screamed inside. "Grandma, wait. You need to know why Daddy is really sick." These were his words, and at that moment, the scalpels stopped in the air became heavy, and my soul understood that something was very wrong, something that I, as a mother, as a woman, could never imagine. If you've made it this far, you may carry a pain similar to mine, that of loving so much that you don't realize when you're being taken to an abyss. So, if this story touches your heart, I ask you with affection, leave your like, subscribe, stay with me. Telling this hurts more than it seems. But maybe, if I don't shut up, other women will also wake up in time. Because this story is not just mine. It belongs to all of us who have already been forgotten by those we swear to protect. At that time, my life still had a certain rhythm that made me forget my age. I would wake up early, put on my flour-stained apron, and bake apple pies to sell at the neighborhood market. He didn't earn much, but it was enough to keep the house alive, and his heart too. On Sunday afternoons, I would take my grandson Mario to the Humboldt Park. He loved running among the trees, asking tough questions about life, and making me smile with those ice cream-smeared cheeks. Brandon, my youngest son, called me often, always worried. He worked with electrical maintenance, took on many services around the city. Adam, the eldest, lived in Cicero with Rebecca, his wife. He was quieter from a young age, and after he got married, he was more absent, but I never complained. A mother who is a mother learns to be content with what little her child offers. A brief phone call, a quick visit on holiday. Adam's marriage to Rebecca was something that, at first, filled me with joy. She was beautiful, polite, called me mother, with that sweetness that melts even stone. I brought flowers to visitors, helped in the kitchen, praised my food even when it was too salty. For a long time, I thought God had given me a daughter after so many years of being only a mother to men. But today, I understand that certain people know exactly what to say, how to smile, when to hug, and also when to hide. Gradually, I noticed a strange control in the way she spoke to Adam. Everything he said seemed to have already passed her approval. I asked, "How's the work, son?" And he looked at her first before answering. Sometimes he didn't even answer. Rebecca said he was tired. That stress was affecting his memory, which doctors were evaluating. She always had an explanation ready. Once, at a Sunday lunch, I served Adam another slice of lasagna. He hesitated. Rebecca took a quick look and said, "He can't. Sodium. So far, so good." But the next minute, I saw her filling his plate with another type of meat, much saltier. When I looked again, she smiled at me as if to say, "Don't get involved." I didn't say anything. I swallowed the food with the taste of stone and kept quiet. Joe, my husband, used to say, "Diane, there's something that your heart feels before your eye sees it." And he was right. It was because of him that I endured so much time alone. Joe died of multiple sclerosis, in a wheelchair that still creaks there on the porch. I took care of him until the last breath, holding his hand even when he could no longer call me by name. After he left, I promised myself that I would never let any of my children feel alone. I thought, if I'm not here for them, who will? Adam has always been the most fragile, despite his strong body, and Rebecca made a point of reinforcing that. Your child is sensitive. He needs peace, not demands. At first I thought she was protecting. Today I know that perhaps she was surrounding. There was one day of the week that I looked forward to with more joy. Tuesday. That was when Mario came to sleep with me. Rebecca said that it was good for him to have contact with older people. I smiled, but I knew that she spoke as someone who hands a dog to someone to take care of, not as someone who entrusts a child. But with Mario, it was different. He threw himself on my lap as if the outside world didn't exist. He told me small, innocent things, and others that even he didn't know had weight. Mom said that Dad will need a piece of Grandma to live. He once said. At the time I laughed, but that phrase stuck. A piece of Grandma. No. There are words that come from the mouth of a child, but seem to be whispered by fate itself. Sometimes I wonder how many mothers have felt this weight, that of giving everything, even their own bodies, and still feeling disposable. If you've experienced something like this, comment below. I believe I've lived it. What a strength. Leave what your heart wants. Because only those who have passed it understand what it is to love until it hurts, and to continue loving anyway. At the time, I didn't know. But that neat world that I thought I had under control, it was already breaking. And when the crack really appeared, it was through a request that didn't seem to be requested. It happened on a cold afternoon, at a dinner table that looked more like court than home. And what they asked me there, it would change everything. Things began to change slowly, like an infiltration that stains the wall until it opens a hole. I still tried to see everything with the eyes of kindness, thinking it was a mother's concern, daughter-in-law's tiredness, couple stress. But the discomfort? He settles in silence. It started with the medicines. Rebecca always showed up with some new, over-the-counter bottle, saying that the doctors trusted her, that she already knew what to do. Adam took everything without question. When I asked, she said it was special medication coming from California. I don't understand these difficult names, but I know very well what it's like to see your child wither day after day. He didn't look like a man in treatment. He looked like a man being drained. Then came the schedules. Rebecca controlled everything. What Adam ate, bedtime, visits. When I called, she always said, "He's resting." If I showed up unannounced, she would get angry. I should have called earlier. He needs peace. And I swallowed, as I always did. Once, Brandon came to visit me and said quietly, "Mom, Adam's weird. Too thin. Too tired. He doesn't look sick. It looks doped." That chilled me. And when Mario, on one of those nights he slept with me, said, "Mom keeps talking about a so-called new formula," my head began to assemble loose pieces of a puzzle that I never wanted to have. What a child hears without understanding. Sometimes it's what adults hide the most afraid. I began to observe better. Rebecca had the habit of going out in the backyard to talk on the phone, always with her back turned, looking around as if hiding. One day, I opened the laundry room window without her noticing. I saw that he wrote down numbers in a black notebook. She spoke softly, as if she were negotiating something. Yes, she will sign. She is already emotionally involved. That's what I could hear before she hung up. That night, I slept poorly. The cold seemed to be inside me, not outside. The next day, I went to visit Adam. I took vegetable soup, as I did when he was little and had the flu in the winter. Rebecca answered the door. I said he was sleeping, but I heard the television on in the bedroom. When I asked to see my son, she said, "Not today." That hurt me in a strange way. I gave birth to that man. I changed diapers, cleaned vomit, pushed swings with my back hurting, and now couldn't even see him. I also began to notice a restlessness in Rebecca, as if she was afraid that I would see her too much. The following week, after leaving Mario at home, I saw something that made me stop. She was in the car, in the parking lot of a remote supermarket, putting a large box in the trunk. He didn't see that I was on the bus across the street. Soon after, a tall man, wearing a cap and black jacket, approached. She handed him something, an envelope. They didn't hug each other. They didn't smile. They didn't exchange words. They only changed the box. And she left. Did I let it go? Yes. I pretended I didn't see it. I was still at that stage where we try to protect the idea we have of someone, even when the facts are already screaming. But my heart no longer believed, and deep down, something inside me began to say, if I don't do anything, I can lose more than one kidney. I wonder what was in that box, and why, as I looked into Rebecca's eyes after that day, did I start to feel afraid? The news came like a bolt of lightning in a cloudy sky. Adam was suffering from kidney failure. Rebecca called me with that heavy voice, but no tremor. He said it was serious, that the doctors had been clear, that there was no time to lose. I let the phone slip through my fingers and sat on the edge of the bed. The room became small, stuffy. I didn't cry. I only heard the silence, that same silence that takes over us when the pain still has no form. The next day, she organized a meeting at my house. Brandon was not warned. I only found out later. When I opened the door, Rebecca came in accompanied by her parents. I sat at the head of the dinner table, thinking we were going to talk, share anguish, find support. But no, it was a court. Rebecca was direct. The test confirmed it. The lady's kidney is 100% compatible, only yours. Her father crossed his arms. Her mother adjusted her glasses on her face. And you're going to donate, right? She asked, as if demanding a promise already made. Rebecca didn't even wait for an answer. It is your duty. You're his mother. Those words cut me more than any scalpel could. Oh? As if the love that kept me alive now was a debt to be paid. I was silent. Mrs. Peterson then added in an icy tone, You won't hesitate, right? Not after all he's done for you? My heart stopped. Adam had barely spoken to me for months. And now, did I owe him my body? Rebecca placed on the table a folder with medical documents, hospital forms, lawyers' contacts. Everything is ready. All that was missing was my signature. They looked at me as if I were a piece of paper waiting to be stamped. They didn't even ask me how I felt. They didn't even mention fear, risk, anesthesia, nothing. There was only one expectation, that I would say yes. But what hurt me the most, it was realizing that my silence was already being interpreted as obedience. I didn't cry in front of them. I nodded my head, with a thread of voice. He said he needed to think. Rebecca got angry. Think. Mom, he can die. I looked her right in the eyes. I saw something hard, cold, behind the trembling voice. I saw urgency, but I didn't see love. I saw control. When they left, I sat in that chair for hours. I didn't even notice the tea cooling on the table. It was no longer a choice. It was a charge. I, who had given my whole life, now I had to hand over a piece of my body, without the right to doubt. That night, I didn't sleep. I looked at Joe's picture on the wall. He seemed to me more alive than ever. What would you do in my place? I thought. But the answer that came was not from him. It was mine, and it was scary, because deep down, a voice whispered, if this is all a trap, I'll have to figure it out before it's too late. And the next visit to the hospital would bring the first concrete clue of what they were trying to hide from me. In the days that followed, I did what so many women have done before me. Fake it. I pretended that I was fine, that meeting didn't leave me broken inside, that I was still the one who ruled my own body. She woke up early, as always, put the water on the fire, folded Mario's clothes with care, ran her hand over the furniture in the living room as if looking for firmness where there is no longer a floor. But inside me, something began to wither. I went to visit Adam more often. I felt that I needed to see it with my own eyes. He was different, very skinny, deep dark circles, paler skin than I remembered. But when I tried to talk, Rebecca would appear, always, as a shadow, as a guard. I never left myself alone with him. He needs to rest. The doctor said it's not good to get emotional. Don't force conversation, Mom. Always with an excuse on the tip of his tongue. And Adam barely looked up. He spoke little, and the little he spoke was always tired, as if he had already given up. Once, I brought him a walnut cake that he always liked. Rebecca took it from my hand before I got close to the bed. He can't eat that. It doesn't go well with the medicines. And that's when I asked, with all the calm in the world, who prescribed these medicines, Rebecca? She looked at me without blinking. The hospital trusts me. Trust. In me. That sounded so wrong to me, so out of place. Since when do hospitals transfer responsibility to daughter-in-law? Since when is medication a secret for the patient's mother? I returned home with the cake untouched and my heart wrapped. At night, I sat on the balcony, in the dark. The rocking chair made that old creak that seems to carry the pain of the years. I looked up at the sky over Chicago, cloudy, as if God had also hidden his face. And I cried. Not loud, not desperate. I just let it drain. It is the pain that does not scream, but weighs. The one you don't have anyone to tell you about, because no one would believe it. It was there, on that balcony, that I began to feel the worst of all feelings. Self-doubt. Am I getting paranoid? Is it an exaggeration in my head? But deep down, I already knew. I'm here opening my heart, telling the story that still hurts me. If you're listening, if this story is reaching your chest in some way, leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, because I still have a lot in store to tell you. And maybe, just maybe, we'll heal together. That week, I started writing in an old notebook. He wrote down everything he saw, heard, felt. Brandon showed up the other day for coffee and saw the notes. "Mom, what is this?" he asked. I said, "It's just for me to remember that I'm not crazy." He laughed embarrassedly, but he was silent afterwards. Deep down, even he knew something wasn't right. What haunted me was Adam's gaze, erased, without reaction, as if everything had already been taken from him, except his breath, and I could no longer distinguish if he was really sick or being sick. The answer I was looking for would come soon, and it would not come lightly, because sometimes the truth enters the house like a boy with a torn backpack and a child's voice. And when Mario opened his mouth that afternoon, everything I thought I knew fell apart. That morning, Brandon showed up unannounced, his face closed and his cell phone in his hand. I sat at the table with him, still with my hands wet with dishes, and before I asked anything, he threw the photos in front of me. "Mom, look at that." They were blurry images, but clear enough to make my stomach turn. Rebecca, there, in the hospital parking lot, handing an envelope to a man in a dark cap. She looked to the sides, as if she didn't want to be seen. That was last Tuesday. I was there doing maintenance on the elevators. I saw it from afar. I took these photos in secret. "Mom, there's something very wrong." I stared at the cell phone screen as if it was going to swallow me. The envelope was thick. That was not a ticket. It was a contract, money, documents, something that no one wanted me to know. And before I could put words together, the doorbell rang. It was Mario. The little one entered with his backpack falling off his back and an old cell phone in his hands. "Grandma, look what I found hidden in Mom's room." It was in the back of the drawer. The device had a cracked screen, but it still turned on. He said he had pressed a button and recorded it unintentionally. When I hit play, my skin froze. Rebecca's voice, whispered and fast, filled the room. "After the transplant, the data will be complete. We deliver everything and close the project." And a male voice replied, "Perfect. Germany has already approved it." That wasn't just a betrayal. It was a plan, an experiment, a business. And I was part of it. Or rather, I was the final piece. I listened to that recording about 5 times. On Friday, I had to get up to breathe. Brandon held me by the arms. "They're using Adam, Mom. And you. They're using the 2 of you for some kind of test. I don't know. Medicine, clinical data." His head was spinning. The pieces began to fall into place. Rebecca's control, over-the-counter medicines, the envelope, Adam's weakness. That was not taken care of. It was poisoning. It was manipulation. And I almost handed over my kidney with a smile on my face. I sat in the armchair, without saying anything. Mario came and leaned his little head on my arm. "Are you sad with me, Grandma?" he asked. I lowered my head and kissed the top of his forehead. "No, my angel. You saved me." The 9-year-old boy, with a broken cell phone, had done what no one else had the courage to do. He showed the truth, but it was just the beginning. Now, I needed to prove it, because if they were willing to sell a piece of my body, what else would they be able to do if I refused? That night, after Mario slept on the couch hugging my old pillow, and Brandon walked away quietly with teary eyes, I sat alone in the living room. The house was dark, only the hallway light on, as if even the walls were afraid to look at me. I got up slowly and went to the hallway closet, the one Joe had made when Brandon was still a baby. At the bottom, in a cardboard box with the smell of storage, were the old albums. I opened one of them with trembling hands. The first photo was of Adam at the age of 5, lying on my lap with his face burning with fever. I remembered it as if it were yesterday. Me with a wet towel, his forehead warm, the whole night awake. Joe slept on the side, exhausted, and I was sitting there, singing softly to calm the boy. I saw another photo, from his graduation day from high school. Adam smiled with his eyes, that joy of those who still believe that the world will be fair. What no one saw in that image was that, a week earlier, I had sold my wedding ring to pay for college books. A simple ring, but loaded with history. Joe gave it to me when he was still cleaning the factory floor, and I used it as if it were made of pure gold. Looking back on all that, my heart broke in silence, not only because of what they did to me, but for what they did to him, with my son. Because Rebecca, she appeared at a stage when Adam was frail. I remember the first time I saw her. Sweet smile, hair tied with a flowery scarf, soft speech. She arrived complimenting my pie, asking about my health, calling my grandson Little Angel. At the time, I felt relief. I thought, thank God someone's going to take care of my boy. But what I didn't know was that sometimes the poison comes in the form of care. I took another picture, the three of us in the park, me, Adam, and Brandon, an impromptu picnic. Adam still in his school uniform, the checkered tablecloth, the crushed sandwiches, the juice in a reused bottle. Life was simple, but full of love. And now I was just an old woman with a valuable kidney and a signature being collected as a debt. I looked at myself in the living room mirror, the reflection of a woman who supported children, who buried her husband, who carried the world on her back, and that now, because she trusted too much, she was about to be discarded like any other body. It's strange how we only understand the size of our own delivery when we realize that it has become a commodity. And look, if you've been here with me so far, listening to every bit of this story, don't let go of my hand, because what still lies ahead, it will show that even the most fragile of silences can become a force that no one expects. The next morning, instead of crying, I got up with another look. For the first time, it wasn't the desperate mother who went to the hospital to beg for answers. It was the woman who was going to start watching, because when love becomes a trap, the only way out, it is to become a hunter in silence. And the next visit to the hospital would show me that I wasn't just right. I was in danger. I went to the hospital with firm steps, but with a trembling heart. I entered the Chicago Medical Center as if entering a battlefield, but with the calm voice of someone who has learned that silence is also a weapon. When I arrived at the reception, I asked to speak to the team responsible for the surgery. The assistant took me to a small room, and there, in a low voice, I said, I need to postpone my decision. I'm dealing with emotional issues that I can't ignore. She wrote it down, respectfully. The doctors did not insist. They said they understood. But I knew that this news was not going to be received with the same understanding outside that door. I got home before sunset. There was not even time to take off his coat. Rebecca showed up. He knocked on my door as if he wanted to knock down the wall. His eyes were wide. His hair was messy, as if he had lost control. And in a way, he did. Are you going to let him die? She cried. I faced that woman I once called my daughter with the calmness that comes from someone who has suffered too much. And I replied without raising my voice, I'm still alive, and I also have the right to think. She froze. For the first time, she trembled. He closed his mouth, and he left without saying anything else. There I understood. What she wanted was not my love. It was my silence. In the following days, I started to act differently. I collected all the medical papers that were with me. I scanned each document. I saved the audios from Mario's cell phone. The photos that Brandon took, I passed to my old computer, and also to a pen drive hidden in the sheet closet. I did everything without haste, without noise, like someone who prepares a minefield without giving clues. At night, I sat in the living room, with the same worn armchair, and stared at the wall for long minutes. I remembered the time when I prepared my children's lunchboxes myself, putting notes with a heart on the napkin. Today, he was preparing tests. It's strange how we go from caregiver mother to suspicious woman within our own family, without even realizing it. If you've been through this, if someone has used your love as an excuse to manipulate you, comments below. He writes, I know how it is, or I understand you. Sometimes, knowing that someone is listening to us is already the beginning of healing. In this new version of myself, there was no room for naivety. I didn't scream. I didn't slam the door. I didn't confront it. I just stopped giving in. And it was exactly this change that began to dismantle the theater that Rebecca had set up for so long. Because when the silence changes its tone, those who were in control begin to get lost. But what I didn't know yet is that the most dangerous answer would come from where I least expected it. And her next step would place Mario directly in the center of the abyss. They came back, Rebecca and her parents. They came as they had the first time, together, firm, cold. I already knew that it was not a courtesy visit. I sat at the kitchen table with my eyes wide open, my face calm, and my heart like a shard of glass. Mrs. Peterson was the first to speak. It's been too long. You had days to think. Now it's time to decide. Mr. Peterson folded his arms and added, "If you don't sign, we will prohibit any contact with Adam, and with Mario too. You're emotionally unstable." Rebecca stood, arms crossed, and gave me a look that looked more like a sentence. "Do you want to stay out of his life? Your grandson? Is that it?" That hit me in the chest like a knife. I didn't cry. I didn't even scream. I just looked at the steam from the kettle rising behind them on the stove. The kitchen was becoming full of dry words and empty of love. After they left, the kettle still beeped. I didn't turn it off. I sat on the couch, my hands shaking. I took a pen and paper and started writing. It was my testament. Not because I thought I was going to die, but because at that moment, I understood that the only thing that still belonged to me was my truth. There, between scribbles and names, I wrote more than goods. I wrote sorrows. I wrote the story of a mother who doesn't scream, but sees, that does not impose itself, but resists. And the next day, I went to the hospital, alone, with the documents in his bag. Signed. I signed with a trembling hand, a tight chest, and dry eyes. Not out of fear, not out of obedience. I signed because I wanted to see how far this lie could go. I signed because if anyone there was lying, I would make sure to walk to the end of this road, just to unmask every step. Would I be used? Perhaps. But first, I would be proof. What if the price of truth was my own body? So be it. But let no one say that I did not fight with the weapons I had left. And that same afternoon, I received an unexpected call. It was the nurse responsible for the surgical shift. And what she told me, it would change everything. On the eve of the surgery, I woke up before the sun. The house was quiet, and even the noise of the heater seemed to call for silence. I put on my older coat, the one Joe said made me look like a detective, and left without saying anything. I took 2 buses to Chicago Medical Center. I didn't warn anyone, neither Brandon nor Mario. By then, I knew that my silence was my protection. I arrived at the hospital and asked to speak to the nurse who was following Adam's case. They said she was on the 4th floor, near the observation wing. I waited in the hallway, looking at the details of the walls as if they were going to give me answers. When she appeared, with a clipboard in her hand, and the tired eyes of someone who sees a lot of pain, I approached slowly. "Sorry to bother. I'm Adam's mother." She smiled gently and led me to an empty staff restroom. "Your son is very dear here. Polite, always calm." I swallowed. Too calm, I thought. I asked carefully if it was true that he could not receive visitors without his wife present. She hesitated. Then he confirmed. Yes. It was a request from Mrs. Rebecca. He said it was for emotional reasons. The team complied. Emotional issues. Again, this excuse. So I asked about the medicines. I described the blue pills I saw on the nightstand in their house on their last visit. She frowned. "Blue pills? We don't have any medication in that tone prescribed for Adam. None." "Are you sure of the color?" "Have. That blue doesn't leave my memory. It was the same shade of the cardigan I knitted when he was a baby." "Can I see his medical record?" I asked. She looked to the side, uncomfortable. "The record is incomplete." Incomplete. He said he couldn't show me anything there, but he would check. He promised to call me at the end of the day. I left there with heavy legs, as if each step was stepping on a glass floor about to crack. I returned home without going anywhere, neither bakery nor market. I sat in the living room, looking at the clock on the wall. Time passed, but everything inside me seemed to be at a standstill. I had no more doubts. It wasn't just a disease. It was manipulation. Rebecca had created a world where she decided everything: who spoke, who saw, who cared, who kept quiet. But now I saw everything. The mother who once cried silently, who was quiet in the face of threats, who lowered her head when they were told, now began to stand up firmly, not out of anger, but for truth. Because one thing is certain, when a mother wakes up, there is no way to fall asleep again. If this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, will it help me to carry it forward? Like and subscribe here to the channel. It makes more difference than you think. That evening, I prepared dinner as usual. Mario ran across the room with the broken cart, and for a moment, I almost forgot about the war that was quietly going on. But the phone rang. It was the nurse, and what she told me. It was the key that opened the last door. A door that, when opened, would not allow any more return. When I hung up the phone, I stood there staring at nothing. The nurse had spoken carefully, but the words echoed like hammers. Your child's medical record has been manually changed. There are exams that have disappeared, and these blue pills have no record in the system. She said she had been suspicious for weeks, but no one listened to her, and that now, with my visit and the right questions, she felt obliged to help. He promised to send me what he could find, discreetly. The next day, I went to Brandon's house. I took everything I had, Mario's cell phone, the pen drive with the photos, the papers I scanned, even the notebook where I had been writing down my memories. We spread everything on his kitchen table, between breadcrumbs and a pot of coffee that was still hot. "Let's put this together as a dossier, Mom," he said. "If they want to play with documents, we will play with truth." Brandon called an old friend who worked in IT at the hospital, and it was this man, in a quick and silent access to the database, who confirmed the last missing piece. Rebecca's name appeared as an outside representative in a proposed partnership between the hospital and a biotechnology company in Texas. The name of the company escaped me at the time, but what remained was the phrase I read in the report: experimental drug for kidney treatment, testing phase. The truth hit like a gale that knocks down everything that seems solid. They wanted to validate data, and they used my son for that. They used me. Rebecca knew that if she could push through the surgery and keep Adam doped, his body would become a perfect showcase for clinical data. And I, as a compatible donor, was the gold seal in the project. The plan was cruel and simple. Run with the transplant, harvest the results, and sell the information. Sell, as if my kidney were a commodity, as if my son's pain were a graph. I sat with my hands on my head. I took a deep breath. I looked at Brandon. "He doesn't know. Adam doesn't know any of this." Brandon agreed. "Not yet. But when you know, it has to be the right way, at the right time." It was not just a question of justice. It was one of dignity. My son, for everything he went through, deserved to hear the truth without screaming. He deserved to understand clearly. It was my mission, my last mission as a mother. And it was then that I understood that I was no longer the woman who asked for permission to exist. I was the woman who was going to expose every lie, even if the whole world tried to silence me. And look, if you've come this far with me, hold firm, because the hardest moment in this story is yet to come, and I promise you'll make it all worth it. That night, back at my house, I sat down at the table and looked again at every piece of paper, every picture, every line written with a trembling hand. I was no longer a forgetful old woman. I was the witness. And the next day, the hospital called me to confirm the last tests before the surgery. But at that moment, who started to prepare a surprise? It was me. Because if they thought I was going to go into that room to be used, they were ready to watch the last act of a mother who learned to bleed in silence. Brandon showed up at my house on a cloudy morning, his eyes sunken and his breath hurried. I had a flash drive with me, and I knew that another part of the truth was about to tear through my chest. We sat side by side on the couch, and he plugged it into my old laptop, the same one Joe gave me the last Christmas we spent together. The screen flashed, and then the video began. It was the parking lot at the back of the hospital. The image, in black and white, trembled a little, but it was clear enough to leave no doubt. Rebecca stood there, her hair tied up in a hurried bun, next to her mother, Mrs. Peterson, wearing a beige coat. The two handed a brown briefcase to a man in a black suit. He looked to the sides before picking up the object. Nothing was said but the gesture. The gesture said it all. The folder was thick. Documents. Contracts. Brandon paused the video. This man works in a company that represents European laboratories, the same one that has a connection with Rebecca's project. My heart beat, as if it wanted to escape from my chest. But that was not all. Mario, quietly in a corner of the room, approached with his cell phone. "Grandma, I have one more thing." I recorded it unintentionally when I left the phone in the car seat. The uncle who was with Mom answered a call, and I listened. I picked up my cell phone and pressed play. The recording began with noises, then a male voice. "Has she signed yet?" And the voice of the man in the parking lot replied, "Yes, yesterday. When it signs the last authorization, we will have what we need to close with the laboratory in Germany." I paused the audio. I felt the ground move away. They were waiting for my signature as if waiting for a sales contract. I was the link, the body, the access code for a profit that would come at the expense of my blood. And Adam? It was just a number, a patient with a code name, a statistic. I got up slowly, went to the window and looked up at the Chicago sky, as gray as my chest at that moment. I closed my eyes, breathed, and suddenly, a memory came. 7-year-old Adam sat on the step of the stairs, wondering if he could sleep in my room because he had a nightmare. I remember how he shook my hand while I slept, as if that was the only way the fear would go away. Funny how certain memories come back with such force that they seem to happen again, right? There are memories that we keep, not because we want to, but because they hold us back when everything else falls apart. What about you? Do you have any memories that still live inside, even after so many years? Have you ever experienced something that seemed like a lie, but was too true to forget? If you want to share it with me, right there in the comments. Sometimes our stories meet even without us knowing. That night, I kept the pen drive in an old jewelry box, along with my mom's brooch, Joe's wedding ring, and a lock of Adam's hair when he was a baby. I had everything I needed on hand. Now, all that was missing was the right moment, and he was about to arrive, because the day of the surgery was scheduled, and no one, absolutely no one, I had no idea what was about to happen in that white room. I woke up before the alarm clock rang. It was surgery day, and the sky was still dark, covered by those heavy clouds that only Chicago knows how to carry. I put on my clothes slowly, each button closed with the calm of someone who has already buried many fears. Brandon came to pick me up. Mario stayed with a trusted neighbor. On the way, the silence between me and my son was full of meaning, but not a word was spoken. We arrived at the hospital and were directed to the preoperative ward. I already knew the way, but everything seemed different, as if the walls had heard everything I knew, as if the ground knew that morning, it was not the transplant that was about to happen. It was the right one. I was left in a room for the final exams, but I asked for a minute before. "I need to go to the bathroom," he said. They let me go alone. I walked down the corridor with slow but determined steps. I knew where to find her. Rebecca was standing next to the water cooler checking her cell phone. She wore a beige blouse, light makeup, and a rehearsed smile. When he saw me, he stepped forward. "You're all set, Diane. The doctors are waiting." I stared at her, steadfast. "Before any scalpel, we have one last conversation." She tried to laugh, as if she was in control. "If it's about your fears, it's normal. Every surgery has risks, but we are doing what is best for him." I approached. I listened to the recording. She froze. And I saw the photos, from the parking lot, from the folder, from the man in the suit. Rebecca looked around, as if looking for help at some door. "For how much?" I asked, in a low but firm voice. "How much are you selling my child's health for?" She hesitated. You're delusional. It's old, weak. The surgery is affecting his judgment." But my voice didn't tremble. Neither did my eyes. "You thought I would die without understanding, that it would be easy to push me to a cold table and erase my history with a contract." He only forgot one thing. She did not answer. "We can grow old, Rebecca. You can get tired, trip, forget where you left your glasses. But a mother does. Feel when what comes is poison. Don't be careful. When affection is staging. And when the urgency is greed." Rebecca stood still. For the first time, her eyes were not cold, were scared. She tried to react. "You have no proof. This will come to nothing." I smiled, a sad smile, but full of something she never had. Truth. "You're right. I haven't given anything to the authorities yet. Yet, Rebecca took a step back. But why do you think I came here? To die silently? Or to see the end of a theater where the audience is me, and the main actor is you, stumbling over your own lies? She said nothing more. He walked away in a hurry. I stood there for a moment, looking down the empty hallway, feeling the calm blood in my veins. I didn't need screaming. My voice had crossed where it hurt most, and I knew this was just the first blow, because the real act, it was yet to begin, and it would happen. Inside the operating room, that night was different from all the others I experienced. There was a thick silence in the house, as if even the furniture was waiting for something. The kitchen clock was 10:17 p.m. when I finished reviewing the will. My hands were steady, but my chest was heavy like lead. I wrote each line with the awareness that that document was not just about goods. It was about choices. I named Brandon as the sole heir to the house. The savings, my few jewels, the memories kept in the attic, and more importantly, my trust. Not out of contempt for Adam, but because Brandon stood by me when I needed to be heard and not questioned, when I needed to be protected and not controlled. I placed the paper inside a light blue envelope, with the same care with which one wraps a farewell gift. Then I took another, smaller envelope and began to handwrite a letter to Adam. I wrote with my soul bleeding, but without bitterness. My son, if one day this letter reaches your hands, it is because I chose silence out of love. Not everything we keep silent about is cowardice. Sometimes, it's just time that needs to do his job. I didn't tell everything in the letter, but I left clues, words that only a mother knows how to use, and that a child recognizes even after the end. I folded the paper carefully, kissed the envelope, and hid it at the bottom of my bag, along with the pen drive, the audios, and the photos. If something happened to me, the truth would find its way. Mario slept on the couch, wrapped in a green blanket that his grandmother sewed for him. His little feet escaped through the edges. I stared for a few minutes. He breathed deeply, calmly, a tired angel. I approached slowly, ran my hand through his hair, and whispered very softly, "You were the light that woke me up." I went up to my room with light steps. I sat on the edge of the bed, looked at the ceiling, and prayed. But for the first time, I did not ask for salvation. I thanked him for waking up before the knife, before the lie swallowed me whole. I thanked her for having eyes to see, even after so many years blinded by love. I closed my eyes and slept, a heavy sleep, full of the past, but also of courage. And the next day, when I opened my eyes, I knew it was the day the theater was going to end, but there was still one last curtain to fall, and it would fall, inside that operating room, when an unexpected voice, to walk through the door. The white light of the operating room seemed colder than any winter I had ever faced. I was lying on the stretcher, dressed in that apron that seems to take away even our dignity. Hands tied, dripping serum, the anesthesiologist adjusting the mask next to me. I felt the strong smell of alcohol and the metallic noise of the instruments being arranged. Everything was ready. Everything. Rebecca watched from behind the glass outside. Next to her, her parents, always with that look of owners of the world. None of them seemed distressed. None of them seemed to pray. Were impatient. Inside me, peace was strange. I knew what was coming, but still my heart was pounding, as if to say, "You've come this far. Now watch it." Dr. Simmons motioned for them to begin. The anesthesiologist took the syringe and approached. He touched my arm, and that's when everything changed. The door to the room opened with a bang that made everyone freeze. A nurse tried to hold on, but it was too late. Mario ran in. The dirty sneakers, the crumpled t-shirt, the red and wet face from crying. "Grandma, wait!" The anesthesiologist stopped. The scalpel was suspended in the air. Mario crossed the room like lightning, with his cell phone in hand. "You can't do that! They are lying! Daddy's sick because of the medicine she's giving!" He pointed to Rebecca, outside the glass. "I have the recording!" The room froze. Dr. Simmons motioned for them to turn off the machines. "What's going on here?" Mario was trembling. "It's here. Oh, listen." He pressed play. His voice was clear. "After the transplant, the patent is ours. No one will know how we got the data." Dr. Simmons frowned. The nurse looked at him in amazement. The assistant stopped everything. The scalpel went back to the tray. Rebecca knocked on the glass, desperate. "Stop it. It's a child. He's making it up." But no one moved. Dr. Simmons left the room for a moment. He returned with the director of the hospital and a security guard. "We will take this to the administration now. The surgery is suspended." Suspended. The word entered me like a breath. It wasn't just the surgery that had been canceled. It was the plan, the lie, profit. I was carefully untied. They covered me with a sheet and sat me on a chair. Rebecca, on the other side of the glass, was yelling at her parents. Mr. Peterson pulled her arm, trying to get everyone out of there as quickly as possible. But it was too late. The cameras recorded. Voices were heard. And Mario? Mario. He curled up in my lap. "Sorry, Grandma. I tried to tell you before, but now I did it. I hugged that boy with the strength of a lifetime. There are things that we live and keep, but maybe telling, we help another heart to breathe. If this story moved you, help me take it further. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let's make this outburst reach those who need to listen. Because what came next? No one, not even me, could imagine. Do you think it's over? But the worst was yet to happen. I never thought that, at 67, I would see a woman younger than me, being led through the corridors of a hospital with her eyes wide with dread, handcuffed, as the world collapsed around her. But here was Rebecca, without the pose, without the sweet rehearsed voice, without the control, just a desperate woman who out of greed put her own family in the corridor of shame. Soon after the surgery was suspended, the hospital administration acted with a speed that surprised me. Dr. Simmons, who until then seemed to me just another cold doctor, showed humanity in his eyes when he apologized to me. He said he couldn't imagine that he was facing something so serious. But I knew. Many people saw it and chose to keep quiet. Now, the silence would be theirs. Security guards were called to contain the confusion. Rebecca tried to resist. "This is a mistake. This woman is delirious. I just wanted to save Adam," he shouted. But her eyes did not ask for justice. They asked for a departure. Mrs. Peterson, who had until then stood like a pillar, collapsed when she saw the officers approaching. "You can't treat us like that. We did everything for the sake of science. She doesn't understand anything. She's a useless old woman." Oh, those words. They entered like a razor, but came out like dust. Because who was ruined there? It wasn't me. It was her. I saw the scene as if it were not real. Mrs. Peterson being handcuffed next to her own husband, surrounded by cameras, nurses, looks. But do you know what marked me the most? It was Adam's silence. He was sitting in a wheelchair, pale, with his eyes downcast, still weak, still not understanding everything they did to him. But there was a tear in the corner of his cheek, a tear that was not from physical pain. It was one of discovery. Police led the Petersons outside as investigators began questioning the medical staff involved. Brandon, firm as ever, delivered everything we had. The photos, the audios, the conversations, the names of the companies, and even the connection with that biotechnology company in Texas. "Everything is here. My mother was almost killed to generate data from an experiment," he said. The investigator only nodded. "This is not just serious. It's criminal." A few hours later, the gang was formally indicted for manipulation of medical data, hospital fraud, and attempted murder. The press, always fast, was already camping in front of the hospital. I saw my face on television for the first time that night when I got home. Elderly woman avoids transplant after grandson reveals family fraud in Chicago hospital. I didn't know whether to cry or laugh, because in the end, I was not saved by doctors, nor by the police. I was saved by faith, and for a 9-year-old boy with a heart bigger than the world. And if you've made it this far with me, I'll tell you, hold on a little longer, because what happened next? It was even more unexpected. You know when life turns you upside down, just to show you who has always been on the right side? That's that. The truth still had one more card to play, and it would come, from the hands of those who least expected it. When it was all over, the police, the doctors, the flashes of the press, the night fell heavy as lead on Chicago. We were taken to a reserved room in the hospital, away from the cold corridors where the world collapsed hours earlier. Brandon helped me into an armchair, and Mario, without letting go of my hand, leaned his head against my shoulder. For a few minutes, I only listened to his breathing. Across the hall, Adam was waking up. Dr. Simmons warned, "He's weak but conscious. Don't overwhelm him." But I knew that what he needed now was not medical silence. It was real. Brandon entered first. He carried Mario's cell phone in his hand and an envelope with the printed papers. I waited outside, looking at the reflection of my face in a glass. I saw wrinkles that I never noticed, and I saw, for the first time, a woman who had done what she needed to do, not out of courage, but out of love. The door opened. The nurse called me. "He's asking for you." I entered slowly. Adam was lying down, eyes sunken, his face pale but awake. When he saw me, he tried to smile, but his mouth trembled. "Mother," I went to him. I sat next to him. I held his hand, as I did so many times when I was a boy, with a fever, afraid of the dark. Brandon stood, leaning against the wall. He said in a calm voice, "Adam, we need to tell you something." Adam frowned. There were 30 minutes of explanations, pauses, sighs. Brandon handed over the flash drive. He showed the papers. He spoke of the company, of fraud, of manipulation. Adam listened quietly, paler and paler, until Mario approached, slowly, and held out his cell phone. "It's quick, Dad. Just listen." The recording rotated. That same sentence. "After the transplant, the patent is ours." When the audio ended, the silence was the deepest I've ever known. Adam put his hands to his face and wept. She cried like she had never cried. "I didn't see it, Mom. I didn't see anything. Forgive me." I shook his hand. "You were sick. They made it look right. But now you know, and it's going to be fine." He collapsed, and I hugged him. Not like a wounded woman, but like the mother I was in the days of fever, of stumbling, of scraped knee. There was no revenge in that room, only truth. And the truth, my son, it does, but it also heals. And in that embrace, I knew my part was done. But the last act was still missing, because a letter from me had not yet been opened. Returning home, after all, was like entering a familiar place with a new soul. The worn carpet at the entrance, which has always given me a certain sadness, now seemed a symbol of permanence. I was still here. The house was still mine. And for the first time, I stepped on her with both feet firmly on the ground, not like a mother carrying the world, but like a whole woman, whole again. The blue velvet armchair, the one in the corner, was waiting for me. It was where Joe liked to stay before he got sick. After he left, I never sat on it again. But that day, I went. Slowly, with my body tired, I sat down and leaned on my back as if allowing himself to rest. And that's when I felt. The wheel of Joe's chair turned a little, as if by habit. I don't know if it was wind, if it was memory, or just nostalgia that pushes things when we don't see it. But I did, as if he said, "You did it." Brandon walked in soon after, with 2 cups of steaming tea, backyard mint. "I did it the way you like it." I nodded with a calm smile. On the table, Mario scribbled a drawing. It was a white-haired woman holding a boy's hand. Behind them, a very strong yellow sun. "It's me and you, Grandma," he said, without looking up. I swallowed. There was no jury, no applause, no newspaper article to explain what that drawing meant. Life was coming back. Adam received royal treatment. The doctors reevaluated his entire condition. Within weeks, signs of improvement appeared. The exams, previously outdated, now showed hope. He called me every day. Sometimes he didn't say much. He was just silent. But there was truth in his silence now. The city followed. Chicago never stops. But inside my house, everything slowed down. Peace has not come as if knocking on the door. She crawled, sat on the couch, and stayed. One late afternoon, I went to the balcony. I took my cup with me. The sky was clear, blue, like in the days when life seems to promise something good. I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath, and I thanked him. Not just for saving my son, but for having saved myself from myself, of a version of me that kept silent, that accepted, that loved without protecting itself. I saved a woman who had been forgotten by her own history, and no one noticed. No one noticed that it was an old lady with white hair who dismantled, alone, with silence and intuition, an international gang. I didn't use a weapon. I didn't scream. I did not invoke revenge. I used what I had left. Look, time, and love. But there was still one last thing to do, because a truth, to be whole, needs to be delivered. And Adam. I had not yet read the letter. Adam read the letter on a cloudy afternoon, sitting in the same blue velvet armchair where Joe used to spend his hours in silence. I stayed in the kitchen, pretending to do the dishes, even though my hands were still under the warm water. When he finished, he didn't say anything. She just came to me, hugged me for a long time, and whispered, "Now I understand everything, Mom." I smiled, without looking at him, because sometimes what we need is not words. It's just the certainty that the truth has reached where it needed to be. Brandon returned to work with more pride on his chest than before, and Mario continues to scribble worlds on paper, but now with a more awakened eye. As for me, I remain here, in the same wooden townhouse that groans on windy days. But now, the silence that was once a burden has become rest. I'm no longer the woman who gave in for fear of losing. Today, if I give in, it's because I chose to. And this difference, my dear, changes everything. I understood that we don't die only when the body fails. It dies when they stop seeing us, when they push us to the corner, as if age erases our lucidity. But time, that honest old mirror, ends up revealing who is who. I was called weak, a disposable old woman, used as if my body had no history. But the truth came, and with it came my rebirth. I was reborn in silence, yes, but firm, like those trees that no one sees growing, but when they bloom, they change the entire landscape. If this story I told you touched your heart in any way, if it reminded you of your mother, your grandmother, or even yourself, help me make her go further. Enjoy this video. It's like a tight hug that tells me, I'm with you. And subscribe here to the channel, which always has past coffee and more stories to share with those who have a living soul. Comment here which city you are watching from. I love knowing how far my voice has reached, and it activates the bell. That way you don't miss out when the coffee is brewed again, and don't go away yet. Listen to the next real story that will appear on your screen. Always remember, each wrinkle tells a story, and each story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story.